The moment the message left Earth, it was quiet, almost too quiet. For decades, humanity had stayed in the shadows of the galaxy, watching, learning, and quietly growing stronger. Other civilizations assumed that Earth was weak, primitive, and incapable of projecting power beyond its small system. They had no idea what humans had endured, what they had built, or the discipline that had been forged in the fires of their own survival. Now the entire galaxy was about to find out. It started with a signal, brief but deliberate, sent through every known communication channel. The message was simple, without any flourish or threat. We have been holding back. Do not test us. There was no arrogance in the words, no gloating, no hint of fear. It was a warning, calm and unyielding. While other species might have tried to hide behind words, exaggerating their power or making empty threats, humanity did not need to. They had nothing to prove. They had only one goal: to make sure no one underestimated them again. The first reaction was laughter. The Council of Interstellar Powers, a coalition of species that had always assumed humans were minor players, shared the message among themselves. Some called it a joke. Others dismissed it as the primitive pride of a species that had barely managed to leave its own star system. There was no understanding that this was not pride but certainty. The humans had survived wars that had almost destroyed their own planet, conflicts that had forced them to innovate in ways no other species could comprehend. Every challenge, every threat, every war had made them sharper, faster, and more resourceful than anyone realized. One historian, from a species known for cataloging wars across the galaxy, noted something unusual about the tone of the human message. There was no anger, no panic, no hesitation. There was a quiet confidence, a calm that made the listener uncomfortable without a word being shouted. Most species could not understand that calm. They were used to threats being shouted or weapons being demonstrated. But humans, the historian wrote, did not need to prove anything yet. They were watching, waiting, and preparing. Back on Earth, life seemed ordinary. Cities bustled, traffic moved in predictable patterns, and children played under the sun. But beneath that ordinary life, the world's defense networks were humming. Advanced AI systems coordinated fleets, satellites, and planetary defenses. Humans were not preparing for a war they wanted, but they were prepared for one they could not avoid. Their strength was hidden, precise, and terrifyingly effective. Every weapon, every ship, every tactic had been tested not against aliens, but against the harshest teacher, the planet itself. Humanity had learned to survive with limited resources, with constant danger, and with no margin for error. Now that knowledge would be felt across the stars. In the Velkath Dominion, a powerful empire that had enslaved many neighboring worlds, the message was received with disbelief. The leaders laughed at first, thinking it a bluff. A species that had lived in relative isolation for so long could not possibly be a threat. They were convinced that Earth had hidden nothing, that their fleets could crush the humans if needed. So they decided to act, to test the so-called warning. They sent a fleet of 5,000 warships toward Earth's system, broadcasting their power to anyone who cared to watch. They wanted to demonstrate dominance, to show that humans were insignificant. For 3 days, Earth remained silent. The Dominion's fleet moved closer, confident and dismissive. On the 4th day, everything changed. One by one, every communication channel the Dominion relied upon went dark. Satellites, drones, and ships vanished from the sensors. Panic spread through their command networks. It was not an attack they had anticipated, not in this form. Then a single transmission appeared on every remaining channel. "You came to see what we were holding back. Now you'll know." The voice was calm, almost serene, but the implication was unmistakable. The historian watching from a neutral station in another system could hardly believe what they saw next. Reports came in from merchant convoys, scouts, and even civilian observers. Entire fleets of the Dominion were disappearing as if erased by some unseen force. It was not chaos. It was precise, surgical, and methodical. There were no screaming messages, no frantic last transmissions. Ships simply ceased to exist, their systems neutralized without harming civilians or innocents. The humans were not just strong, they were deliberate. Every strike, every maneuver had a purpose. In the Galactic Council, alarm spread quickly. Members who had once dismissed humanity as inconsequential were now scrambling to understand what had just happened. Drones sent to investigate the missing fleets returned images that were hard to believe. Ships melted in ways that defied known physics. Hulls warped and twisted as if the humans had bent reality to their will. Analysts struggled to explain it, to reconcile the humans they had underestimated with the power now on display. It was terrifying, not because humans were cruel, but because they were so controlled, so precise, and so entirely capable. On Earth, life continued, outwardly unchanged. Streets were still busy, markets still thrived, and people went about their daily routines. But within the command centers, humans were fully aware of what was happening. Every decision had been calculated, every move considered. The fleets that had been sent toward them were now being monitored, their remnants mapped and catalogued. Humans did not celebrate. There was no cheering or fanfare. This was not victory. It was a statement, a demonstration of restraint as much as power. They had warned the galaxy, and now they were showing what restraint had looked like for centuries. The alien historian noted something that most observers missed. Humans were not fighting for glory, for conquest, or even for revenge. They were fighting to show that underestimating them was dangerous. Every action was guided by strategy, discipline, and a profound understanding of consequence. They had suffered enough at the hands of more powerful species, and they had learned lessons that were written in the scars of their own history. The historian wrote that this was a turning point, not just for humans, but for every civilization that thought power could be measured by appearances alone. Among the colonies and trading stations, whispers began. Traders who had relied on dominion protection suddenly found themselves free. Colonies that had once feared enslavement now saw humans as unpredictable, almost mythical protectors. There was no effort to conquer, no demand for tribute. Humans simply acted, and the results were undeniable. Ships that had once projected the Dominion's power now lay in ruins, and those who had hoped to witness human weakness were instead confronted with an entirely new kind of force, one that combined intellect, strategy, and absolute resolve. It was in this quiet, deliberate action that the true nature of humanity became evident. The galaxy had assumed that humans were like other species, ambitious, territorial, quick to anger, and quick to panic. They had assumed humans would react like them. They had assumed that humans could be bullied. Every assumption was shattered. Humans did not react with emotion. They acted with purpose. They had prepared, waited, and now they were executing a plan that the galaxy had never imagined could exist. Even as observers tried to piece together the events, Earth remained calm. Cities were still full of life. Children played in parks, and people went to work without fear. The contradiction was unsettling. How could a species capable of such precise and terrifying power live among themselves so quietly? The answer, those who watched closely realized, was that humans valued life and order in their own world as much as they valued strength across the stars. Their power was not for show. It was a tool to protect, to warn, and to ensure that no one would make the mistake of testing them again. By the end of the first week, the message was clear across the galaxy. Humanity had warned the galaxy that it had been holding back. Now the proof was evident. The fleets that thought they could intimidate Earth had vanished, their colonies disrupted, their leaders confused. Other species began to whisper in fear and respect. Humans were not monsters, but they were formidable beyond anything the galaxy had previously imagined, and they had made it very clear. Earth would not be a passive observer in the affairs of the stars. The historian concluded the record with a note that would be quoted for decades. The humans do not boast. They do not shout. They do not panic. But when they act, every step is certain. Every action is deliberate. They have lived through their own fires, and the galaxy will learn that survival, discipline, and willpower can be far deadlier than fleets or weapons alone. The calm before the storm had ended. The galaxy had been warned. Earth had spoken. And what the galaxy would soon see was a humanity not restrained by fear, not held back by uncertainty, but ready to act with the precision, skill, and determination of a species that had endured everything and emerged stronger for it. The galaxy had not yet fully recovered from the shock of humanity's warning when the Velkath Dominion decided to act. They were a proud empire, used to power and control, and they could not bear the idea that a single planet, a small blue world, could hold back an entire galaxy with nothing but a message. The leaders gathered in their towering command halls, their voices full of disbelief and irritation. They could not understand why humans had stayed silent for so long. Silence to the Dominion was weakness. It was an invitation to attack. And now, faced with words they had laughed at, they were determined to prove that humans were nothing but a primitive species, unworthy of attention. The plan was simple. Send a fleet of 5,000 warships toward Earth and demonstrate the might of the Dominion. Every vessel was armed to the teeth, carrying enough firepower to destroy planets if needed. The Dominion broadcasted their movements, making sure every nearby system saw their confidence, heard their threats, and knew that Earth was about to be crushed. Their propaganda was meant to terrify humans, to show them that resistance was pointless. Their fleets moved in formation, disciplined and precise, a symbol of power that had subdued countless species before. Back on Earth, life appeared normal to the casual observer. Cities thrummed with the usual energy. Markets buzzed with people going about their business, and the sun rose and set without disturbance. But beneath the surface, humanity was preparing in silence. The moment the Dominion fleet was detected, humans mobilized with calm precision. It was not fear that drove them. Fear would have been a distraction. Instead, there was understanding, calculation, and readiness. Every military unit, every ship, and every tactical system was aligned for action. The humans had expected this. They had always been ready. The Dominion fleet moved closer. Their confidence grew with every parsec, every transmission, every display of power. They believed they were entering a weak system, a species untested and unprepared. Their warships formed lines, weapons charged, commanders shouting orders into the empty silence of space. They expected to see panic, to see fear in the sensors of human systems, but there was none. And that unsettled some of the Dominion officers. They had never encountered silence like this. Then, after 3 days of approach, the unexpected happened. Communications channels went dead. It was subtle at first, a ship here, a command relay there. But soon the entire fleet began to experience anomalies. Sensors failed, ships stopped responding, and systems flickered with strange, unexplained signals. Officers scrambled to restore contact, but nothing worked. Panic began to spread through the Dominion's ranks. They had never imagined that the humans could strike without warning, without firing a single shot. And yet their forces were disappearing. From the perspective of observers outside the conflict, it was almost surreal. Entire fleets vanished from sensor grids, leaving only fragments, broken traces of hulls and energy fields. There was no screaming, no chaos, just a calm erasure that defied understanding. Civilians and traders in nearby systems reported seeing the fleets dissolve before their eyes, as if some invisible force was rewriting reality. No one could explain it. The Dominion had always relied on brute strength and intimidation. Now they were confronted with something completely different. The humans, for their part, did not celebrate. There were no broadcasts announcing victories, no displays of triumph. Their actions were precise, methodical, and almost clinical in their effectiveness. Every strike had a purpose. Every maneuver was planned to neutralize threats without unnecessary destruction. The humans were not fighting for glory. They were demonstrating restraint. This was the power they had warned the galaxy about. The fleets that had laughed at their warning were now experiencing a reality they had never anticipated. Even within the Dominion, confusion spread quickly. Some officers wanted to retreat, but the chain of command was in disarray. Commands were not reaching ships. Sensors were failing. Communication lines were broken, and all the while the humans remained unseen but fully aware. They were everywhere the Dominion had not expected them to be, striking at critical points, dismantling systems, and freeing colonies that had long suffered under Velkath control. The human approach was different from any known warfare in the galaxy. They did not attack indiscriminately. Civilian worlds, colonies with no strategic value, and neutral trading stations were left untouched. Their focus was precise: eliminate the enemy, rescue the oppressed, and demonstrate capability without unnecessary suffering. Observers described the efficiency as almost eerie. Ships and installations were neutralized with minimal collateral damage, leaving the galaxy in awe of the human skill and discipline. As the battle unfolded, news of humanity's precision and power spread rapidly. Traders, explorers, and even spies transmitted what they had seen. Fleets that had been certain of their dominance now questioned their own understanding of the universe. Humans had never shown off, had never bragged, and yet their actions conveyed a single, undeniable message: underestimate us, and you will regret it. Even those who had long believed humans to be weak or insignificant could not deny the skill, intelligence, and decisiveness on display. On Earth, the humans continued to operate with calm focus. Military personnel coordinated in a quiet, disciplined manner. Satellites, orbital defenses, and space fleets moved in perfect synchronization. There was no panic, no overreaction, no unnecessary destruction. The humans had learned from their history, from the wars and disasters that had shaped their planet. Every calculation, every maneuver, every strike was informed by lessons written in the blood and struggle of generations. They had endured, adapted, and emerged stronger. Now the galaxy was witnessing the results. The alien historian who documented the events noted a striking contrast between humans and other species. While most civilizations relied on spectacle, intimidation, and fear, humans relied on knowledge, foresight, and precision. They did not shout. They did not threaten. They acted, and the effects were far more profound than any display of anger or strength could have achieved. The historian wrote that humanity's restraint was, in itself, a form of power, something that few species could comprehend, let alone counter. As the Dominion fleet continued to crumble, some of their leaders tried to communicate, to negotiate, to understand what was happening, but the humans did not respond with words. They responded with action. Critical systems were neutralized, enslaved populations were freed, and the Dominion's ability to wage war began to collapse from within. Observers noted that the humans were not cruel. They did not destroy for pleasure. Their strikes were purposeful, disciplined, and effective, aimed at ending conflict swiftly while minimizing unnecessary suffering. Within the Velkath command halls, panic turned to fear. They had assumed humans were primitive, untested, and weak. Now they realized they had been wrong. Every assumption had been shattered. Their fleets had been eliminated not through reckless aggression, but through precise, calculated strategy. And the humans had done it with a calm that made the Dominion officers question everything they thought they knew about power and warfare. The galaxy began to take notice. Other species who had once dismissed humans as insignificant now whispered their names with a mix of awe and fear. Traders altered their routes, colonies prepared for unexpected events, and councils debated what could be done to understand this new power. Observers recorded the humans' actions not for gossip or intrigue, but to learn, to study, and perhaps to avoid similar mistakes. The humans had demonstrated that strength was not just in weapons or numbers, it was in intelligence, discipline, and the willingness to act decisively when necessary. Even as the conflict continued, Earth itself remained outwardly unchanged. Cities were vibrant, life continued, and the ordinary routines of daily life carried on. Children played, markets thrived, and the world appeared peaceful. Yet beneath the surface, humans remained vigilant, watching every system, coordinating every fleet, and ensuring that their warning was clear. Underestimate them at your own peril. It was a lesson in restraint, discipline, and power all at once. By the end of the confrontation, it became undeniable. Humanity had been holding back not out of fear but out of choice. They had been ready for conflict, but they had waited, observed, and acted only when necessary. The Dominion, once proud and invincible, had learned a harsh truth. Humans were not to be underestimated, and their warning was not a bluff. The galaxy now faced a species whose strength was measured not by their threats, but by their ability to act with precision, intelligence, and purpose. The historian concluded that the humans' approach during these days would be remembered for centuries. They had not sought conquest, glory, or vengeance. They had acted with purpose, skill, and restraint. And in doing so, they had rewritten the understanding of power in the galaxy. Other civilizations would think twice before dismissing humanity again. The message had been clear all along. Humans had warned the galaxy that they had been holding back, and now by their actions they had made the first undeniable demonstration of what that meant. The galaxy had learned in the most unmistakable way that humanity was prepared, capable, and precise. And that was only the beginning. The galaxy was still trying to process what had happened when reports started coming from neutral observers. Fleets that had moved to intervene, expecting a weak and unprepared species, were now hesitant. Word of humanity's precision, restraint, and terrifying effectiveness spread quickly. Even those who had never encountered humans directly began to whisper about them, describing a force that struck without hesitation, yet spared where possible. It was a new kind of power, one that combined intelligence, strategy, and determination. It was not chaos but order that moved like a predator across the stars. Back on Earth, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. People continued with their daily lives, unaware of how closely their everyday actions were linked to decisions that shaped the galaxy. Cities bustled, children played in parks, and markets were full. Yet under the surface, humans were coordinating a massive effort, monitoring every system and predicting the moves of every fleet that dared to approach. The humans did not need to shout or display force to make their point. Their calm efficiency sent a message louder than any cannon or laser could. The Velkath Dominion, humiliated by the loss of their fleets, refused to accept defeat quietly. They sent envoys and small strike teams attempting to learn what had happened, but even these missions ended in confusion and failure. The humans were everywhere the Dominion had not anticipated, appearing at critical points without being seen, disabling weapons and systems in a manner that was almost surgical. Every move the humans made was deliberate. There was no showmanship, no unnecessary violence, only the result of careful calculation and experience born from centuries of survival and conflict. Outside observers struggled to comprehend the scale of what they were witnessing. Entire fleets had vanished, yet no human ship had been seen in direct combat. Colonies that had once been under strict Dominion control were suddenly free, their enslaved populations liberated without a single human casualty. The humans did not conquer for glory. They acted to protect, to free, and to demonstrate the power that had been held in reserve for so long. Other species could not understand the discipline that allowed such results. The human strength was not in brute force alone, but in thought, preparation, and timing. As neutral trading convoys moved cautiously through nearby systems, many reported seeing the remnants of the Dominion fleets. Broken hulls, scattered debris, and strange energy distortions filled the void where ships had once been. Sensors picked up anomalies that did not match known technologies or physics. Analysts across the galaxy were baffled. Nothing in their records, nothing in their history, could explain how a species so underestimated could cause such devastation without direct confrontation. And yet the humans had achieved it without arrogance, without spectacle, and without malice. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from multiple civilizations tried to understand the humans' approach, their strategy, and their intentions. Many feared that humanity's restraint was temporary, that their calm would soon give way to full-scale aggression. Others argued that the humans' actions demonstrated a new kind of intelligence, one that valued life and order over conquest, yet could act with terrifying efficiency when provoked. The debate was heated, but no one could deny the evidence. Humanity had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Meanwhile, Earth's fleets continued to operate quietly and efficiently. Command centers coordinated with satellites, AI systems, and human officers in a way that ensured every move was precise and deliberate. There was no panic, no overreaction, no reckless aggression. Humans had long learned the lessons of their own history. They knew that strength without control could be dangerous, that victory without planning could be temporary. Every decision, every strike, and every maneuver reflected centuries of experience, struggle, and survival. The Velkath Dominion tried again, this time sending small groups of elite ships to probe human defenses, hoping to find weakness. But every attempt failed. Humans anticipated their moves, neutralized threats before they became critical, and rescued captured populations with astonishing efficiency. Observers described the actions as almost miraculous. Ships that had once symbolized power and terror were now useless against a force that had been underestimated for far too long. Even within Earth, the scale of coordination was impressive. Military officers worked alongside AI systems that monitored fleets, predicted enemy movements, and coordinated interventions across multiple star systems. Human strategists calculated each possibility, each outcome, and each reaction. There was no improvisation born of panic. Every decision was deliberate. Every move was part of a larger plan to show the galaxy what humanity had been holding back for so long. In the Dominion command halls, fear began to take root. Leaders who had once dismissed humans as insignificant now realized they had underestimated the wrong species. Panic spread as more fleets failed to respond, more colonies reported liberation, and more fleets disappeared from sensors. The Dominion's arrogance had been their undoing. Humans had waited, observed, and acted with precision, and the consequences were catastrophic for those who had ignored the warning. Observers from other civilizations noted that humans did not seek conquest, glory, or tribute. Instead, their actions focused on eliminating threats, freeing the oppressed, and ensuring that any further aggression against humanity or its allies would be met with immediate and overwhelming response. Traders and diplomats began to reconsider how they interacted with humans. Colonies that had once relied on dominion protection now sought refuge or alliances with Earth. The galaxy was learning that humanity's strength was not just in its weapons, but in its discipline, strategy, and moral clarity. As weeks passed, the scale of humanity's operations became clear. Freed colonies began to organize themselves, reporting back to Earth with requests for assistance, medical support, and protection. Humans responded, sending aid convoys alongside monitoring fleets, ensuring that those who had suffered under the Dominion were not left to rebuild alone. Observers noted that this combination of strength and compassion was unprecedented. Humans could destroy, yes, but they could also protect, heal, and restore. It was a balance that few species understood, and fewer could emulate. The historian who documented these events wrote extensively about the contrast between humans and other civilizations. While most species relied on aggression, fear, or intimidation, humans relied on intelligence, planning, and precise execution. They did not need to show force to be respected. Their actions spoke for themselves. Every attack was purposeful, every intervention was calculated, and every act of liberation or protection was deliberate. This balance of power and morality was something that reshaped the galaxy's understanding of strength. Even as observers tried to analyze the humans' tactics, there was a sense of unease. No species had ever encountered a force that combined such efficiency, restraint, and precision. Humans had waited, studied, and acted only when necessary. They had struck not out of emotion, anger, or desire for conquest, but out of careful planning and experience. Every fleet, every strike, and every action had been designed to communicate a single, undeniable message. Underestimate humanity, and you will regret it. Back on Earth, the ordinary rhythm of life continued. Markets remained open, children played in streets and parks, and people went about their daily routines. Yet within command centers and fleets scattered across space, humans worked tirelessly. Every movement was coordinated, every system monitored, and every fleet directed with precision. The contrast between the calm, ordinary life on the surface and the extraordinary coordination in the stars highlighted the discipline that had been cultivated over centuries. Humans were not reckless. They were not aggressive for the sake of aggression. They were deliberate, patient, and deadly when provoked. By the end of Part 3 of the conflict, it was clear that humanity's warning had been more than words. The galaxy had been shown what humans were capable of, and the message was clear. They had been holding back, not because they were weak, but because they chose to. And now, by acting with precision, discipline, and care, they had ensured that their strength would be respected, feared, and understood. The humans had not only defeated their enemies, but had set a standard for how power, strategy, and morality could coexist in a galaxy that often valued only brute force. Observers from other species continued to document and debate the events. The Velkath Dominion, once proud and feared, was now a cautionary tale. Fleets and colonies reevaluated their alliances and strategies. Traders adjusted routes to avoid potential conflicts. Colonies under threat began seeking protection, not just from human fleets, but from the knowledge that humanity's discipline and intelligence were forces that could not be ignored. Humans had reshaped the understanding of what it meant to hold power in the galaxy, and the impact would be felt for generations. The historian concluded that the humans' actions during these weeks would become a defining moment in galactic history. They had not sought to conquer or rule. They had acted to protect, to demonstrate capability, and to ensure that no species would underestimate them again. The lesson was simple but profound. Strength is not in the weapons alone, but in the wisdom, discipline, and foresight to use them. The Velkath Dominion was broken but not yet defeated. Its leaders, humiliated by the loss of entire fleets and the liberation of countless colonies, refused to surrender. Pride and desperation drove them to marshal every remaining resource, every remaining ship, every trained soldier still under their control. They sent out urgent transmissions, calling for reinforcements from allied species and even distant colonies that had yet to witness humanity's power firsthand. The message was simple. Earth must be destroyed or the Dominion itself would collapse. Earth, however, remained calm. Humans did not panic. They had anticipated this reaction. The warning they had sent months ago had been ignored, laughed at, and dismissed. Now the Dominion was revealing the true extent of its desperation, and humanity responded as they always had, precisely, deliberately, and without unnecessary emotion. Command centers coordinated fleets that had been lying in wait, ready for this exact moment. Satellites monitored enemy positions. AI systems calculated probabilities of attack, predicting movements even before they were made. Every human commander knew their role, every officer understood their orders, and every ship acted as part of a greater whole. When the remaining Dominion fleets approached, they were met not with reckless aggression but with strategy. The humans did not rush to fight. They allowed the enemy to move into positions that would maximize the effectiveness of their countermeasures. Sensors picked up fleet formations and predicted their next moves. Without firing a shot, the humans manipulated the battlefield, guiding the enemy into traps and zones of control that seemed invisible until it was too late. The Dominion had thought they understood the universe, but the humans had been playing a different game entirely. Then, when the Dominion struck, they found themselves unable to respond as they had expected. Human weapon systems were not only advanced, they were coordinated in ways that no other species could match. Missile swarms intercepted before reaching targets, energy shields adapted to every known form of attack, and defensive drones anticipated enemy maneuvers before they occurred. Entire sections of the Dominion fleet were neutralized almost before their crews realized they had been targeted. Panic spread quickly among the attackers, replacing confidence with fear. The humans did not celebrate their victories. There were no broadcasts of triumph, no messages of insult, no displays of force. Their strikes were precise, aimed only at neutralizing threats and protecting liberated populations. Colonies that had once feared the Dominion watched in awe as human fleets appeared, swiftly disabling military infrastructure without harming civilians. The combination of skill, restraint, and discipline was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Other species, witnessing these events from afar, began to understand why humans had been underestimated for so long, and why that mistake could never be repeated. Even as battle raged across multiple star systems, humans focused on strategy rather than chaos. Fleet commanders coordinated movements across vast distances, ensuring that every attack, every maneuver was part of a larger plan. When enemy ships attempted to retreat or regroup, humans anticipated their actions, cutting off escape routes and neutralizing reinforcements before they could arrive. The Dominion's remaining leaders grew increasingly desperate. They had underestimated the humans once, and now they faced the full consequence of that miscalculation. The Galactic Council, which had observed the conflict with growing alarm, began to understand the uniqueness of humanity. Most species relied on aggression and intimidation to achieve their goals, often losing control in the process. Humans were different. Their power was not in brute force alone, it was in foresight, preparation, and execution. Every human action was deliberate. Every strike was measured. They did not need to shout. They did not need to display arrogance, and they did not rely on luck. They acted, and the results spoke for themselves. For the Dominion, every failure increased internal tension. Commanders argued, blaming one another for mistakes that had not occurred. Communication lines broke under the weight of disorganization and fear. The humans, by contrast, operated with flawless coordination. No fleet moved without purpose. No action was wasted, and no opportunity to protect or liberate was missed. Civilians on liberated planets saw humans as calm protectors, precise in action yet careful to minimize harm. This combination of skill and morality astonished observers from every corner of the galaxy. As the conflict escalated, human fleets began to systematically dismantle the Dominion's remaining military infrastructure. Shipyards, weapons factories, and communication hubs were neutralized with surgical precision. Entire fleets disappeared as their command structures collapsed. The humans did not chase glory. They did not attack beyond what was necessary. Every action had a purpose, and every purpose was aligned with the larger goal of ending the conflict efficiently and minimizing unnecessary suffering. Colonies that had once been under Dominion control began to rebuild, supported by aid convoys that followed closely behind human warships. Neutral species continued to monitor the conflict with a mix of fear and admiration. Traders adjusted their routes, diplomats recorded strategies, and scholars began compiling reports on humanity's methods. The humans' combination of efficiency, restraint, and tactical brilliance was unlike anything previously observed. It was not simply that humans could fight, it was how they fought. They acted as a single, coordinated entity, anticipating every move and countering it before it could become a threat. Their discipline and strategy were unmatched. Even within the Dominion, individual officers began to recognize the truth. Humans were not motivated by revenge or malice. They were not fighting for conquest or fame. They were acting out of necessity, strategy, and principle. Each strike was calculated, each movement deliberate. The humans had not attacked recklessly. They had waited, watched, and then acted with precision. Every failure of the Dominion was a consequence of underestimating a species that had been holding back for centuries. In the midst of battle, human commanders communicated with clarity and calm. Orders were concise, precise, and executed without hesitation. AI-assisted systems coordinated fleet movements across light years, predicting enemy reactions and adjusting tactics instantly. Humans moved like a single organism, each part understanding its role in the larger mission. It was not chaos, it was perfection under pressure. Observers from neutral species could only watch, stunned by the efficiency and skill displayed in real time. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued normally on the surface. Cities thrived, markets remained busy, and people went about daily routines unaware of the full scale of the conflict in space. Beneath this calm, however, humans worked tirelessly, coordinating the largest strategic operation the galaxy had ever witnessed. Their focus was absolute. Every action was deliberate, every strike measured, every decision calculated. This was not war for pride or domination. It was war to protect, to end threats decisively, and to show the galaxy the cost of underestimating humans. As the days passed, the Dominion's desperation grew. Entire fleets were eliminated, critical systems destroyed, and colonies freed. Yet still the humans showed restraint. They did not annihilate entire populations or attack beyond what was necessary. The balance of strength and morality was something the galaxy had never encountered. Observers struggled to reconcile the humans' immense power with their restraint. How could a species capable of such precise destruction also act with such care for life and order? By the end of the campaign, the Dominion was effectively neutralized. Remaining forces surrendered or fled, leaving the humans in control of strategic areas necessary to stabilize the liberated colonies. The galaxy had witnessed a species that had been underestimated for centuries, revealing both their power and their ethics. Humans had demonstrated that strength did not require cruelty, that precision could replace panic, and that discipline could outmatch brute force. The message was clear: humanity would not be tested lightly, and those who attempted to challenge them would face consequences beyond their understanding. The historian observing these events wrote that humans had not sought domination. They had acted as guardians, liberators, and strategists. Their actions combined morality with unparalleled skill, discipline with compassion, and strategy with execution. The galaxy, having observed these events, would never again treat humanity as a species to be underestimated. The humans had waited, they had acted, and they had set a new standard for what it meant to hold power responsibly. Even after the Dominion's fleets were neutralized, human warships remained in key positions, ensuring stability, protection, and ongoing coordination with liberated colonies. Aid ships followed closely behind, providing supplies, medical care, and guidance. The galaxy began to understand that humanity's strength was not just in weapons or numbers, it was in their planning, their patience, and their understanding of consequences. They had acted decisively but with restraint. They had liberated but not conquered. They had shown power but not arrogance. By the close of Part 4, it was clear to the galaxy: humans had transformed the understanding of conflict, power, and strategy. They had demonstrated a balance between might and morality that no other species had achieved. The Dominion had been neutralized, but the remnants of the Velketh Dominion were scattered, demoralized, and desperate, yet they refused to surrender immediately. Pride, fear, and the instinct to survive drove their remaining leaders to cling to the hope that they could turn the tide. They sent out small fleets, desperate strikes, and covert sabotage missions, trying to regain control of what little they had left. Their goal was simple: show the galaxy that humanity, though powerful, could be challenged, and that the Dominion still held relevance. They underestimated one critical factor: They had already misjudged humanity once, and humans never repeated the same mistake. On Earth, nothing in daily life indicated the vast scale of the conflict unfolding beyond the planet's orbit. Markets were alive, children played in parks, and the world seemed peaceful to an outside observer. Yet beneath this calm, humans orchestrated a coordinated campaign that spanned multiple star systems. Fleets moved with precision, supply lines flowed without delay, and strategic decisions were made with remarkable efficiency. Every ship, every officer, and every crew member knew their role and understood the importance of restraint. They were not fighting for revenge or conquest. They were fighting to secure freedom, to protect the innocent, and to demonstrate the consequences of underestimating humanity. The Dominion's scattered fleets attempted to regroup, concentrating their remaining forces in isolated pockets. They believed they could surprise humans and gain temporary advantages. However, humans anticipated these movements. Advanced reconnaissance and predictive AI systems allowed them to calculate enemy positions and likely maneuvers before the Dominion even realized their own plans. Each strike the humans launched was targeted, calculated, and surgical. Entire fleets vanished, their ships neutralized almost before the crews could react. Observers described it as almost impossible to comprehend, a force that struck with unmatched precision yet did not harm those who were not a threat. Civilian populations on previously occupied planets began to witness a new reality. For years they had lived under the oppressive control of the Dominion, fearing the arbitrary cruelty and power of their rulers. Suddenly human fleets arrived, not to conquer but to liberate. Military installations were neutralized, weapons caches destroyed, and enslaved populations freed. Humans coordinated these actions with care, ensuring that civilians were safe, informed, and able to reclaim their homes and communities. Witnesses described these liberations as awe-inspiring. It was not just military power on display. It was empathy combined with precision, strategy paired with morality. The Dominion, seeing the effects of human strategy firsthand, fell further into chaos. Commands became inconsistent. Communication lines broke under pressure, and officers began to turn on one another, blaming mistakes that were not even their own. Their remaining fleets were ineffective against the humans' coordinated movements. Entire sectors fell under human influence without a single unnecessary loss of civilian life. The Dominion had expected a species that panicked, that reacted emotionally, that fought for glory. Instead, they faced a force that was deliberate, disciplined, and deadly in a way that no previous adversary had ever been. Even as the battle continued, the humans' coordination amazed neutral observers. Fleets moved across vast distances seamlessly, intercepting enemy strikes, blocking escape routes, and protecting liberated colonies. Communication between ships was instantaneous. Decisions were made with clarity, and actions executed with flawless timing. There was no panic, no chaos, and no wasted energy. Every movement was part of a grand strategy that prioritized both efficiency and the protection of life whenever possible. The humans demonstrated that strength need not be brutal to be effective. Reports from liberated colonies told stories that seemed almost unbelievable. Entire cities that had been under Dominion control were freed without destruction. Prisoners were released, children returned to their families, and communities began rebuilding. Aid ships followed closely behind human fleets, delivering supplies, medical care, and infrastructure support. The human strategy was as much about restoration as it was about combat. This combination of liberation and support made a lasting impression on the galaxy. Observers remarked that humanity had rewritten the understanding of what it meant to be powerful. True strength, they learned, was measured not only in military might but in the ability to protect and rebuild. The Galactic Council watched these events with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Most species had never encountered a civilization capable of wielding such power with such discipline. Many argued that humanity's actions were unprecedented and could not easily be replicated. Scholars and diplomats debated the implications. A species that could fight with such precision, protect the innocent, and neutralize threats simultaneously had changed the rules of galactic engagement. Every decision, every strike, and every act of liberation was noted and studied. As leaders realized that underestimating humans again could be catastrophic. Within the Dominion, the psychological impact of human strategy became evident. Leaders who had once believed in their own invincibility now faced the undeniable truth. Humans did not fight for pride, they fought with purpose. They did not panic, they calculated. They did not act recklessly, they executed with precision. This was not the behavior of a species to be underestimated. Every failed attack, every lost fleet, and every liberated colony reinforced the fact that humanity's power was both deliberate and unrelenting. The Dominion's arrogance had been its greatest weakness. Human fleets continued to move through strategic points, clearing remaining threats while maintaining order in liberated regions. Supply lines were protected, civilian populations received assistance, and surveillance ensured no rogue elements could exploit gaps in security. Humans coordinated efforts across vast distances, showing a level of organization that no other species had ever managed. Neutral observers were forced to acknowledge that humans had achieved something extraordinary, the combination of tactical genius and moral clarity that ensured efficiency without unnecessary destruction. By this stage, it became apparent that the Dominion's remaining forces could not recover. Key installations were destroyed or captured, fleets were neutralized, and colonies liberated. Attempts to regroup or strike back were met with swift and precise countermeasures. Humans had not sought to humiliate their enemies, yet the consequences of underestimating them were devastating. Entire leadership structures of the Dominion collapsed, leaving those who had once ruled terrified, powerless, and aware that their era of control had ended. Even as the conflict reached its climax, human conduct stood out. They did not pursue revenge. They did not act for personal gain or glory. Every decision was guided by a sense of purpose and responsibility. The liberated colonies began to recover quickly, supported by humans who not only removed threats but also rebuilt communities. Systems that had been devastated by previous occupation were restored, hospitals and schools reopened, and infrastructure was repaired. This approach demonstrated a level of strategic sophistication and ethical consideration that reshaped how the galaxy viewed war, power, and leadership. Observers noted that humans operated like a single organism. Decisions made in command centers on Earth influenced fleets across multiple star systems instantaneously. AI-assisted systems coordinated complex maneuvers, anticipating enemy reactions and adjusting strategies in real time. Fleets moved with precision that seemed almost preternatural. Every strike was deliberate. Every defense was calculated. Every movement was synchronized. Humans had created a new standard for operational excellence in warfare. As the Dominion's collapse became inevitable, the liberated populations expressed gratitude and admiration. They recounted stories of humans arriving silently, neutralizing threats with efficiency and ensuring their safety above all else. Witnesses from neighboring systems were equally amazed, observing that a species once underestimated had demonstrated the ultimate combination of strength, intelligence, and compassion. The galaxy began to understand that humans had not only survived centuries of internal conflict on their own planet, but had also applied those lessons to interstellar warfare, reshaping perceptions of their capabilities forever. The historian who documented these events wrote extensively about the balance humanity had achieved. Most species relied on raw power, aggression, and intimidation to achieve objectives, often with costly consequences. Humans, however, combined strategic foresight with ethical conduct, efficiency with compassion, and precision with protection. They acted decisively but never recklessly. They neutralized threats, liberated the oppressed, and ensured stability in areas affected by conflict. Humanity had demonstrated that power could coexist with morality, and that strength need not be brutal to be effective. By the end of Part 5, the galaxy had witnessed a transformation. The Velkath Dominion was no longer a threat. Fleets were neutralized, colonies freed, and key infrastructure restored. Humans had demonstrated not only their capability for war, but also their commitment to ethical action and protection of life. Other civilizations began to reconsider their strategies, alliances, and assumptions about strength. Humans had rewritten the rules of engagement. They had shown that being underestimated was a mistake, no SP. The last remnants of the Velkath Dominion were scattered, broken, and powerless. Yet the galaxy had learned a lesson that no one would forget. Humanity had acted with precision, discipline, and care, reshaping entire star systems without succumbing to chaos or cruelty. Across liberated planets, the people who had suffered under Dominion rule were finally able to breathe freely. They began to rebuild, reclaiming homes, communities, and their sense of security. Human fleets patrolled the regions to ensure stability, not to impose control. It was a demonstration of power combined with responsibility, a rare balance that left the galaxy in awe. The humans had shown that strength could coexist with morality. They had neutralized threats, protected the innocent, and liberated entire civilizations, all while avoiding unnecessary destruction. Even as fleets moved through previously occupied systems, they did not indulge in displays of dominance or triumph. Every action was deliberate, every strike measured, every decision informed by foresight. Humanity's approach was not about showing power. It was about enforcing order, safeguarding life, and sending a clear message: underestimate us, and you will regret it. Across the liberated regions, human personnel coordinated with local leaders to restore infrastructure, medical services, and essential supplies. Hospitals were rebuilt, schools reopened, and markets thrived once more. Even planets that had been left in ruin by decades of Dominion neglect began to recover rapidly, thanks to human efficiency and organizational skill. Supply fleets moved smoothly between star systems, carrying food, medicine, and technical support. Observers from other species could not help but note the combination of military precision and humanitarian effort. Humanity had achieved something unique. They had used power not only to fight but also to heal. As the galaxy watched, it became clear that humanity's actions were reshaping diplomacy as well. Species that had once been aligned with the Dominion or neutral out of fear now reconsidered their positions. Some sought alliances, hoping to understand the humans' philosophy and methods. Others approached cautiously, wary of provoking a species that had already demonstrated unparalleled tactical skill. Humanity's influence spread not through coercion or intimidation, but through example. They had shown that it was possible to act decisively, protect life, and maintain discipline simultaneously. The Velkath Dominion's leaders, those who had survived the final campaigns, were forced into isolation. Their authority shattered, their fleets destroyed, and their colonies liberated. They were left to reflect on the consequences of arrogance. The humans had not sought vengeance. They had not pursued conquest. Instead, they had acted with precision and fairness, neutralizing only those who posed a threat. The Dominion's collapse was not punishment. It was a natural result of misjudging a species that had always been prepared, always been disciplined, and always acted with foresight. Human fleets continued to patrol liberated space, ensuring that no rogue factions could take advantage of the power vacuum left by the Dominion's collapse. They did not impose rule. They enforced order, protected civilians, and stabilized systems. Colonies once under oppressive rule began to govern themselves again, with guidance and support from humans who acted as coordinators rather than conquerors. Observers from neutral civilizations marveled at the effectiveness of this approach. Humanity's combination of tactical skill and ethical conduct had set a new standard for interstellar interaction. Even as the conflict formally ended, the message of humanity's restraint and capability remained clear. Other species began to reconsider their assumptions about power, strategy, and diplomacy. For centuries, civilizations had relied on intimidation, brute force, and aggression to achieve their goals. Humanity had demonstrated that intelligence, discipline, and moral clarity could accomplish far more. They had neutralized fleets, liberated populations, and restored order without unnecessary bloodshed. In doing so, they had fundamentally changed the galaxy's understanding of strength. Throughout liberated regions, human efforts extended beyond immediate military action. Engineers and scientists worked alongside local populations to restore essential infrastructure, repair starports, and reconnect communication networks. Agricultural systems that had collapsed were rebuilt, ensuring that communities had food security. Schools and universities reopened, offering education and training that had been interrupted for decades. This combination of military and humanitarian effort was unprecedented. Humans had shown that being powerful did not require oppression. It required responsibility, planning, and care. In some regions, former Dominion soldiers attempted to regroup or resist. Human forces responded with calculated precision, neutralizing threats while offering avenues for surrender and integration. Prisoners were treated humanely, interrogations were conducted with purpose, and those who posed no threat were released under supervision. This approach further distinguished humans from other species, emphasizing that their goal was not revenge but order and security. Observers marveled at the discipline required to act decisively against a threat while maintaining ethical standards. Meanwhile, Earth itself remained a hub of calm activity. Citizens went about their daily lives, unaware of the vast operations occurring across liberated space. Markets thrived, schools operated normally, and communities rebuilt their routines. Yet beneath this ordinary surface, humans maintained unparalleled coordination. Command centers, fleets, and support systems functioned as a single, cohesive network. Every movement was synchronized, every decision calculated, and every outcome aligned with long-term objectives. The contrast between normal daily life and the immense scale of interstellar operations highlighted humanity's unique approach to power. The Galactic Council observed and documented these final phases of the conflict. Scholars, diplomats, and military analysts struggled to comprehend how a single species had achieved such a balance of strength, morality, and discipline. Most species relied on aggression and intimidation, often leaving destruction in their wake. Humans had shown that strength could be precise, controlled, and ethical. They had acted with foresight, protected the innocent, and rebuilt what had been destroyed, all while neutralizing threats with absolute efficiency. It was a new paradigm of power. As systems stabilized, humans worked to ensure lasting peace. Formerly occupied colonies were given autonomy, supported by human advisors who provided guidance without imposing control. Trade routes reopened under supervision, ensuring economic stability. Medical and educational aid flowed steadily, helping communities recover from decades of oppression. Every step taken by humans reinforced the lessons they had taught through action. Power was not about domination, but about responsibility, strategy, and care for others. Even the Velkath Dominion survivors could not deny the humans' accomplishments. They had faced a species that had been underestimated for centuries, and the consequences had been devastating. Yet the humans had not sought revenge. They had acted with purpose, intelligence, and moral clarity. The Dominion's collapse was inevitable, not because of brutality, but because humans had waited, observed, and acted decisively when necessary. It was a lesson in discipline, foresight, and responsibility that the galaxy would remember for generations. As peace settled across liberated space, humans communicated a clear message to all species: underestimate us no longer, respect order and act responsibly, or face the consequences of misjudging our patience and discipline. Their actions spoke louder than words ever could. They had demonstrated that strength without control was dangerous, but strength with strategy and ethics could reshape entire civilizations. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's capabilities firsthand, and no one would doubt them again. Observers from other civilizations documented every detail, creating records that would inform strategy, diplomacy, and understanding for centuries. Humans had redefined the meaning of power. They had neutralized threats, liberated populations, and restored order without succumbing to chaos or unnecessary destruction. Their actions had shown that the combination of intelligence, discipline, and morality could achieve far more than aggression and intimidation alone. Humanity had not only survived the challenge, they had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be a dominant and responsible species. Finally, humans withdrew from occupied regions once stability was assured. Fleets remained nearby for monitoring, but direct involvement decreased. Colonies governed themselves, trade resumed, and communication networks were fully restored. Humans had left a lasting legacy, not one of fear or domination, but one of protection, discipline, and careful application of power. They had held back for centuries, not out of fear but out of choice. Now, having acted decisively and responsibly, they had demonstrated the full measure of their capabilities. By the end of Part 6, the galaxy understood a fundamental truth: humans were not to be underestimated. They had endured hardship, learned from history, and acted with unmatched discipline and moral clarity. They had neutralized threats, liberated oppressed populations, and restored order across star systems. They had fought, yes, but with intelligence, foresight, and restraint. The message was simple, clear, and unforgettable. Humanity was a force capable of incredible power, tempered by ethics, a